Can you guys hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I want to make sure it was working.
Okay. Chris just told us to turn the mics off until we were ready.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I wasn't not getting that information.
I get it. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, bye.
We can hear you, Karen. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I want to make sure it was working.
Okay. Chris just told us to turn the mics off until we were ready. Oh, it's on the delay. I get it. Thank you. It's on a delay. It's playing it back for us now. Yeah, that's weird. I don't know. Karen, can you hear us?
I can now. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. We were just trying to figure out a couple of audio issues. Everybody's around and working.
You can. Got it right now.
Hopefully it won't disappear. You want it, you mind to make it bigger?
No, I want to go away.
Oh, you don't want to see us.
That works.
So if you get sick, when do you guys know how to do that?
Oh,
Okay.
it's Amy's turn after that.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock. I'd like to start the July 21st planning commission meeting. If we can all rise to the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. To the July 21st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting for the City of Credit River. All commissioners should have received a copy of tonight's agenda. We have a consent agenda with one item on it and two public hearings, one for a Northern Natural Gas conditional use permit and the other for an amendment or a number of amendments to the Credit River zoning ordinance. Does any commission member want to add or amend anything to the agenda tonight?
No.
No? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Oh, first, second. Let's see. Yes.
I have a motion by Steve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Amy. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Say.
Motion carried. Okay, great. We have a consent agenda. Those items on the planning commission agenda, which are considered routine or non-controversial, are included as part of the consent agenda. Unless a planning commission member specifically requests that an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, second, and vote. Any item removed from the consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. We have one item on the consent agenda. That's the May 19th, 2022 Planning Commission meetings. Let's see here. Can I get a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Mark, motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Abe. All in favor of approving tonight's consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Okay, let's move on to tonight's public hearings. We have two of them. The first one is related to Northern Natural Gas conditional use permit at property address 7120 196th Street East. In your package, you should have received the NNG plans. There's two documents for that, and then as well as a staff report prepared by City Planner Nash. Before I open the public hearing, Cindy, can you please provide a summary of what the applicant is requesting?
Sure, so Northern Natural Gas is leasing,
There we go.
Northern Natural Gas is leasing a portion of this property for the construction of a substation on the property. That is a conditional use permit under Credit River zoning ordinance. As a part of a separate application, they've also submitted a driveway permit application with a request to have a second driveway on this parcel. If you look through old aerial photos, you see that at one point in the long ago past, there was a driveway serving a building here. We don't know if that was ever, we don't have any records of that driveway being approved, so that to use that now, that driveway needs to be approved by the city council as a second driveway as well. So included in your packet is their plans. They're showing landscaping surrounding the site. I do have the landscaping plan on the screen right now. And they would access the site directly from the driveway coming off that road. In about this location, come in to a fenced area, and they'd be able to park a vehicle in this area to then gain access to doing any maintenance in here. My understanding is that they would only be accessing the site a couple times a month, so this isn't a traffic generator. But they are planning to plant fairly large trees around the perimeter of the site to provide screening from what that would look like. Is somebody here from the applicant this evening? Hi. So I'll give them a chance
Yeah.
to explain the project in more detail if you want to go to the podium and the microphone. And we'll have to, there's a button on the microphone. You'll
Hold
have
it
to
down.
pull that down.
Should be a green light that goes on. You're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we,
Could I just get your name?
Oh, yep, Stephen Martinez,
And you're with?
Northern Natural Gas, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we obtained an easement from the underlying landowner a couple of years ago to construct this town border station. We have a customer request for additional gas in the area. So we'll be building the station with full-grown vegetation up to 16 foot tall around it. So there'll be a 6-foot security fence that'll be inside the trees. And it will essentially, what a town border station is where we bring gas in, where the distribution company receives it and then distributes it out to the community.
The easement runs for how long?
It's a perpetual easement.
Great. We may have some other questions for you. I think I'll open up. Cindy, are you all set?
Yep, go ahead and do the public hearing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to open up now the public hearing related to this conditional use permit. This is a time where residents can provide comments pertaining to the application. We did not, Cindy, receive any written comments tonight related to this?
No, we did not.
Okay. Is there any resident here tonight that would like to make any comments related to this conditional use permit? Great. So if you want to come up, I'll press the button down until the green light goes on, and then please state your name and address and then your comment.
Leroy, is that light on?
Nope. Nope. Thank you.
David and Chris Clemens. We live across the 27. We have the property 19425 Foxfield Drive. So we were given notice that we're in proximity of the facility.
Okay,
And so we're here to find out more about what this is and what the impact will be. Recently, we were able to obtain a drawing of where this facility is going to be, and looks like it's maybe going to tie into an existing main that goes through our neighborhood. Some of our concerns are the size of the facility, what it's going to look like. Is there any danger to us as based on our proximity? But then also, does it have any impacts relative to the future expansion of 27? And what impacts would that have on our property relative to the facility that they're putting in?
okay.
And you studied this more than I did, so you have more questions.
Okay, so I have a question on the drawing for the trees around it. Where is Texas Avenue on that drawing?
Texas
left
Avenue's
side.
on the left
Left.
side.
And 196, I think, is on the lower part of the drawing.
Okay, so they'll come in from the bottom of the drawing, they'll come in from 196, and then
Correct.
so north is to the top.
That is correct.
And so this is a 200 square foot by, or 200 foot by 200 foot building, so 40,000 square feet, is that correct? No,
4,000.
20 by 20 is 4,000,
because it says 200 by 200 on this
right?
drawing.
So is that the property they're gonna occupy, 200 by 200?
It says
Says 200.
200 by 200 NMG property proposed.
That would be their easement.
That's the easement area.
Okay,
Okay, so that's easement. So how big is the actual building?
Well,
We can get that.
we'll answer that question.
Okay.
What else, what other questions you have?
We'd like to know what the timing is on the master plan regarding Texas expansion south of 21. Because if this goes in, all of the expansion is going to have to take place on the west side, which is where Gray Fox is. We'd like to know what the timing is for that,
Okay,
because that's gonna, we bought 2.5 acres to have 2.5 acres, not to have it taken away.
okay,
Because there's other areas that this could potentially go in where there aren't houses right there already existing.
okay. We'll try and address that too. Anything else?
Oh, and then what does the guardrail, because it looks like that guardrail is gonna run a significant distance.
What's the question though?
Well, is that just like a typical guardrail that you would see for traffic so that,
I think, yeah, we'll have the NNG representative ask,
Okay.
answer that too. My understanding, it would be to protect whatever's behind the guardrail. I mean, it's to protect cars from, if they go off the street, they don't hit
Yeah.
the substation.
so, because the substation looks like it's on the corner, but there's additional, all of this that goes for quite a distance.
Yes,
That says guardrail and other things that are gonna be above ground.
We'll have him answer that. I can only speculate that it has to be a certain length just to protect the substation, but we can get that.
yeah, so I mean,
answer.
is the idea that they're connecting into the main that's there at the top of the.
On the north side?
Yeah, that's what it
I'm
looked like when I
assuming,
looked at it.
you know, we've got the markers all through the neighborhood, and I'm assuming that's the main.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
The main
so-
gas line.
I think that kind of sums up,
Okay.
you know, as we're trying to understand what is this.
Okay, so we'll try and answer those things. Thank you very much. Please stick around because we'll have Stephen come back up and try and address those, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, any other resident like to come up? Go. Go ahead. I think the light turned off, so could you press the button? Just keep it pressed until that green. The power mute button.
Yeah, just yell loud. They'll pick you up someplace.
Steve will withhold his.
And I see green. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you. Could you
I don't
state
need
your
that.
name and address, please, for us?
I'm Paul Burke. I live at 7151 196th. And I have done some queries about this with Cindy and with Stephen Martinez. And I still have some questions. Visually, this is going to change the neighborhood from bucolic to looking industrial, in my opinion. I'm pleased to see that the plan includes the fairly mature trees. But I don't know what how that will really soften the looks of a 6-foot chain link fence topped with wire. And I'd like to know, is that wire going to be barbed wire or razor wire?
If I recall right, I thought it said barbed wire, but we'll have him answer that. We'll have him answer that.
Okay. I believe, to answer the question of a previous speaker, the buildings are going to be 36 by 16 and 2 of them, and a small one that's 8 by 10. I assume they're all single-story buildings. And then there's going to be a heater that's an open air piece of equipment to keep the gas from freezing in cold weather.
Mhm.
So that's basically
Is that a question? you
what
have?
it's going to look like inside the fence.
Okay.
And then the fenced area, I calculated it out to be about 168 by 168 feet.
Mhm.
That fence be black vinyl coated chain link. And so that's probably good as long as the vinyl
Mhm.
holds up
Mhm.
and doesn't look ratty like they sometimes can get the look. I'm concerned about noise.
I believe it's.
Northern Natural Gas told me this is not going to be a compressor station, so there won't be any gas compression going on, but there's going to be throttling of gas from high pressure to lower pressure. And I'm wondering what kind of noise, if any, that produces.
I read somewhere, we'll respond to that too. I thought it was in the application though, like how loud it would be. And if I recall right, it was related to, or it said something about it. It's as loud as a person in their backyard conversating with somebody else. That's how loud it was. That's how loud it would be. So we can answer that. He'll be able to answer that too.
Okay. I have some experience with regulatory affairs in my previous business life. I'm retired now.
Yep.
To the point that I know that regulations are consensus standards, and they change, and they basically are the weakest that can be sold to somebody at some point in time. I have not, Stephen has not been able to tell me yet to my satisfaction, and it's probably as much as he knows, I'm sure he's being honest and forthcoming, that it's like, this is the plan today. And I ask questions about the future, and I don't feel comfortable that we know how operations might change in the future at this site. I asked about environmental concerns that I have, and I see in the document that's part of that drawing is part of, that there is a environmental impact study apparently in progress somewhere. And I'm wondering, does the Credit River Planning Commission have a voice in that, or is this something just between NRG and the federal government regulatory agency that they have to comply with?
Okay.
And if the Planning Commission has a voice, I'd like to know how a resident's voice adds into that, factors into that.
Okay.
So there's not a compressor station. I see references to a gate station or a town border station that they call this, to an expansion machine, a reciprocating expansion engine. And I'd like to know more about, again, but that's back to the question of what equipment is going to be there, how noisy will it be, at what times a day.
Sir, have you looked at the document that was posted to the?
Yes.
See, okay. And
I read that.
That didn't answer that question.
I don't think so. If it was in there, I missed it. I apologize.
Okay.
I don't believe it was in there.
So your question is related to what all the pieces of equipment are in there? Because that would take a
And
while tonight.
how, I don't care really what kind of equipment's in there.
Yeah.
I care how loud it might
Okay.
get at different times of the day.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned voice or noise. All right. Anything else?
Northern Natural Gas tells me that no pollution emissions are anticipated under normal operations. And I wonder what that really means. Are there abnormal operations that might release, like some kind of a overpressure situation where they got a relief valve and all of a sudden they're going to be letting gas out into the neighborhood because of a overpressure situation they're trying to avoid? Northern Natural Gas told me that there would be no odorization put into the gas at this location at this time. But the research that I've done shows that a very common part of a gate station, a town border station, which is how they define this, is to put odorant into the gas as it goes to their customer and I am that person's customer.
Okay.
Okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is probably the end of my questioning.
Okay, great. Hopefully I got them all, and if I didn't, we'll come back to you.
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Nope, now you turned it off. This time it's stayed on. It's on. It's on. Yep. Yeah, green's like on.
Mark Gangler. I live at 7200 186th Street.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
7200
Okay,
196th Street.
thank you.
It's the lot adjoining the lot in question here.
Okay,
I guess I'm to the west. I'm sorry, I'm to the east of.
you're to the
lot.
east, on the hill, kind of like.
Yes. 28 years we've been there, and like they said, it was a neighborhood. That's why we moved there. It's all farmland, and I don't know what this thing is going to look like, but I don't want to look at it.
Mhm, mhm.
As far as that lot itself, I think 5 people had bought that lot prior to anybody being able to build on it. I looked at buying it several times, and then somebody came in and said that everything was okay. The issue is their primary septic field is on the east side of the creek, and their secondary is on the west side, which is where this particular station would be going. So what does that do to that lot? What is that guy's alternate septic going to do? There was concern about pumping it across the creek. That house has been there 20 some years. The chances of a secondary site being needed
I can't,
pretty good.
right, and we'll answer that question for you. I can't believe that we would, a substation could go in there and take away somebody's alternative to septic.
That's their alternate site.
Yeah, so
And
we'll
the
find out.
driveway on that property was put in before the house was built, and back then the rules were that you couldn't have more than one driveway on your lot.
Mhm.
And that's where that second driveway came in. He built a pole shed. And he built his own house, so that was going back and forth. So he had the 2 driveways, he had the pole barn. His alternate site, the lot's been a mess since it was developed.
Mhm.
And it's just a concern that, is he the ones that's leasing, that's gaining the profit from leasing the land to him?
I don't know that. We can ask him about the lease, but I can't ask him if he's making a profit from it or.
Well, it's payment, I think profit. But, I guess that's my big thing is, along with everybody else, I don't want to look at it.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a 16-foot tree it's at 2 feet when we plant it. Just, that's a big chunk of property to be thrown something like that up there. If that's what they need.
Okay,
Concern is about the lot
Yep.
and, looking at it and smelling or hearing or
yeah,
environmental, everything.
Yep.
There is a creek in the pond right there too, so whether there's an EPA issue or not, I don't know.
okay.
So.
Okay, great,
It's a
thank you.
concern.
Thank you.
There's quite a bit of wildlife that goes through there constantly,
Okay,
every day, all day. Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Deer, fox, coyote, crane,
yeah, we
all
all,
of that
right.
reside over there.
Anybody else would like to speak tonight? Okay, hearing none, we will address all of those things. I'm going to close tonight's public hearing. Can I get a motion to close tonight's hearing? So moved. Motioned by Abe. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by by Steve. All in favor of closing tonight's hearing, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Why don't we, before we ask our questions, we have Stephen approach the podium and maybe we can ask him. I tried to catch everything and you can address those concerns that we've heard. The first thing before I start, Stephen, Cindy, do we have these in other areas of Credit River?
I'm sure we do.
Okay.
One item that I will address real quick.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
One of the questions was about how could this change in the future? You know, they're proposing this today, but can they add more things later? And the way that we do our conditional use permits is that they have to build to the site plan that's being approved and considered at that time. So if anybody wanted to buy any conditional use permit, if anybody wanted to make a change to something, they would need to come back in for an amendment.
Okay,
So which would reopen up the whole
Reopen this
process,
process. Yep.
right.
which would give the residents time to also come.
And Stephen,
You do have, there's one on Huntington Way, Town Border Station on Huntington Way. There's the next closest one, I guess, would be on 210th. There's a similar situation, no buildings though, at those.
Okay.
So there's lots of these within the community that you may or may not be able to see.
Future, let's say, so the conditional use permit today is what it is. Do you envision it grow? Do you envision ever coming back, and why would you have to come
I
back?
wouldn't speculate on that. It's pure speculative information.
What would cause you to have to adjust what you're proposing?
I don't know. I wouldn't speculate on it.
Has it ever happened before?
It can happen, but I would stop short of speculating as to what
I know,
could
but
happen.
what would cause that to happen?
I wouldn't speculate on it. There's
Which-
several different things that could occur,
Yes,
but I would stop short of speculating.
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you how it could change. Just there must, like a road that's going to be expanded. Isn't that a way that it could change?
No, because our easement would predate the road right away. We're outside of the road right away.
Okay. Could additional requirements for more houses in the area that have to be served, could that
If
change?
there was a need for additional pressure and the current station wasn't able to transfer that, there could be additional things added to the station. To what those would be, I don't know until we have the request and to find out what those decatherms would be.
Would that expand the buildings, or would that be done within the building?
It would again be a speculative manner if I answer that question, because I don't know what could happen in the future or what the request would be from the customer. It would be a case by case basis.
You understand the concerns that you heard. I mean, they want to know, is this going to get bigger? Is it?
So as of today, this is the plan. We don't have any current future plans to expand it. So this is the footprint that we've applied for a CUP, as Cindy said. Should we have to make modifications, we'd have to ask for an amendment to the CUP. It would be a normal process.
Okay. Okay, let's just go, maybe we just go through these things that hopefully I wrote them down right. So is there any danger to having these things close to people's homes?
Not that we're aware of, no.
How about the size? Could you give me the size of the buildings? I think there was questions about.
Yeah, there's 3 buildings. There's 2 36 by 16 and 1 8 by 10.
Okay, so the 40,000 square feet, I thought that's what I heard. That's the lot size, okay. Okay, you may not answer this, but any impacts to the future, like 27 gets expanded to more than the 1 meter?
So our easement would predate that expansion. And so the road,
The road wouldn't touch yours, but it may, Cindy, in the case where his,
Yeah, great question. Great question. I am not aware of any plans that Scott County has to widen
right, and
Texas in
in
that
the comp plan,
location.
the 2040 comp plan, I didn't see anything where Texas is going to be expanded.
I mean, it certainly could happen at some point in time. And that's one of those things, looks like the right of way width in that area is about 75 feet today. It seems to be off-centered where maybe at some point in time, and the center line of the existing road is off-centered and is more to the west. And you can see as you go north on Texas, it widens out and it's probably more like 100 feet probably in this area today. Anyways, there certainly aren't any plans at this point in time for what that construction might look like if it was ever widened, or what impacts there would be on other properties.
Okay, and if, even if it was widened, and let's say the substation doesn't go in there, I mean, they may still lose a part of their land if the county wants to. Yeah,
But in this case, it'll all be on our side.
That's kind of with any road widening project, though, depending on the current conditions when they come through.
Right, but the current conditions don't have a substation. And so if they currently moving in there and widen the road now,
But our,
it would be shared.
sure, our easement's there regardless of the station, our easement is in place. And so they would,
Cindy, what's the utilities, running on 27? Is there a present utilities?
A separate one, I'm not aware of a separate one except for the one they'll have that's gonna
Right.
run up to that existing pipeline.
there is one and we're outside of that.
You're outside.
We are exclusively on the lot that we are taking easement on.
So as you guys go north across 3 lots, you have a separate agreement with those property owners?
We have a facility easement here along with a pipeline easement, and we have a pipeline easement all the way up to where our crossing occurs with our main line. Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was existing before the site substation, or?
It was part of this. Those were required as part of this, yes.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the noise level?
yeah.
Yeah, so it should be at ambient noise level, just like the application information has just depicted. Probably get more noise from traffic than you would from our station's operation.
What would they hear? A buzz?
I mean, I'm not an expert on what they would hear, but the noise level itself would definitely be below what like the traffic noise would be. Could be a buzz, there could maybe something kicking in within one of the buildings. There's some monitoring equipment that's in there. But again, it's very minimal noise, if any. We are surrounding this site by full-grown vegetation that will be planted at the time in which it's installed, meaning that they'll be spaded in trees. We're not waiting 20 years for them to grow. So that would also reduce additional noise that may be within the station where it would not filter out.
Do you know how many feet you would no longer be able to hear whatever noise it's
I
making?
don't, I'm not a noise expert, I'm sorry.
Okay, it wasn't in the. I could have sworn I read something about it's as loud as a conversation in the backyard. I thought I read that. I don't know if that was in your report or that
It
was,
wasn't in my report, but
okay.
Couple of questions. Lease eventual,
It's an easement, yes.
okay. Size of the trees and initial planting, and what's the species?
There's 2 different types of species that we listed on the plan. Size of when they're installed, it would be anywhere from 14 to 16 feet though. They'll be spaded in.
Just more from, we all know the citrus trees, the shade trees are all. So we're looking more toward the evergreen.
These will all be evergreens. There's 2 types of evergreens. I'll have to find the vegetation
there's
plan.
Black Hills spruce and American larch.
Yeah.
The, when we talk about the species, of course, there's not a live well. No well property. As we move forward for watering, who takes care of that? That's
It's
you
our
guys.
responsibility and it's within the conditional use permit that if they were to die, we're to replace them and we're aware of that.
Okay. The 2 36 by 16 buildings, the 1 8 by 10.
Mhm.
Why 3 separate buildings? What are they all?
One of them is a regular building, contains regulating equipment.
Yeah.
The other one is a meter building, contains metering equipment, and the other one is an EFM building, which contains electronics for the site.
Are these pole barn type
No,
structures?
no, they'll be just your standard still exterior building. We have a color called northern blue, is what they would be within the station.
Again, your venting of natural gas, as any of us who have natural gas or LP gas, our our regulators outside of our homes do vent
Yeah.
periodically. So who regulates your venting? Is that under the Minnesota Pollution Control, or who regulates your venting into the atmosphere?
FERC, Federal Regulatory Energy Commission.
Okay, that's, they do inspection once a year, they,
I'm not sure what exactly FERC does every year. I don't know, but that's who we're regulated by.
that information might be helpful to some of these residents who maybe have some concern.
We have no plans for venting at this location, though.
There's no, oh, okay, there's no vent at this time. But yeah, you're still getting that information as to who regulates them. If we had information for that, like. numbers, things that- the two driveways. So there's two driveways, is that correct, Cindy?
Well, there's one driveway for the home, but this easement is sitting on the
Asking
same
a
property as the
secondary.
home, so that creates a request for a second driveway.
Does that interfere with any future zoning or any future requests that we may have in residential, in our residential market in the future? They're requesting a second driveway for this purpose. Someone else comes in and says, we're putting a pole barn up the back of our building, we want another driveway to come in for that purpose. Are they conflicted?
No, they're not necessarily conflicting. The city council is in their discretion whether or not to grant a variance for a second driveway.
Okay. The reviewing of this purpose in the future. So that'll go through the regular conditional use permit process. It will all get opened up. All these fine people and anybody else who wants to have some public input will have it at that time. Noise to them, neighbors and neighbors. Public wetland encroachment. There was none. You kind of see it at one corner, getting a little close. There is no wetland encroachment. Designated
No, I'm
wetland encroachment. I didn't see it on the.
not aware of any encroachment.
Nor is there encroachment on that alternative septic field, is there?
I did reach out to Scott County Environmental Services, and I apologize, my microphone's down. I reached out to Scott County Environmental Services, and they said that where the septic, both the primary and the alternate septic are fine.
And then, yeah, I think contact info for you guys. If there's a complaint from residents in the future, they're saying, hey, these guys aren't keeping up there to the bargain. How is that? How do they come in and say, wait, there's 3 trees that have been dead for 12 months, nobody's made the attempt to replace them. How does that get addressed by the city credit bureau?
It was on.
Oh, you just turned it off?
There we go.
So we would notify them that they would have X amount of time to replace the dead vegetation, and if they didn't, we would be able to take additional typical enforcement action that the city has at its
So there would be
disposal.
residents calling in the city saying, hey, those trees are dead.
Yep.
Here it is.
Yep.
Okay. So secondary septic site, not an issue anymore. It's outside of these boundaries. Who maintains the site? You guys cutting lawn, weed control, whatever it is, it's all done by you guys.
Yep, that's correct.
Is that subcontracted? Or
It is
that-
subcontracted. There's a third party.
All right. If your gas company sells to another gas company, conditions of this conditional use permit, just continue riding through.
Yes, conditional use permits run with the land.
Okay,
So if they sold to a different company, it would just transfer to that.
all right. One question, Zach.
I'm gonna go back to some of, I don't wanna take all the time, but go ahead. I'm gonna go back to some of the questions that some of the residents had. The guardrail, it seems really long to somebody.
So it looks
Can you-
like the guardrail is just in this, it's really specific to this location up here that's actually not part of the conditional use permit. It's just part of this
Correct.
drawing.
I can't see I couldn't see.
Yeah, it's really small.
There's a 15 by 15 at the very north portion
Okay.
there. That's what the guardrail will be around. And it's for integrity, for protection. There will be an above ground setting there. It's called a valve. And so that would be there as part of that. And so that is required.
Okay,
So that's where you tie in.
Actually, we're tying just to the north, but because we're in a wetland, we can't, where the pipes currently run, we can't really install a valve setting in the wetland without negative impacts to the environment. So we've moved it up on the hillside out of the wetland footprint.
let me ask you this. If this property owner didn't lease this land to you, what would you have done? You said that you're building this to serve one other customer, one other or just serve
A
other
customer
customers?
would be like a CenterPoint or an XL
Oh.
distribution companies that
Okay.
were within your areas.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. But what would you have done if that property owner didn't lease the land there?
It's not appropriate to address at this hearing.
Why is that?
There are landowner rights in the state of Minnesota. That's public information. I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving you legal advice, but we won't discuss what those processes would be. But in short, there may have been potentially a condemnation, but that's as most I'll speak on it.
Is there a barbed wire fence about around?
There is. It's a 6-foot security fence. So there would be barbed wire, 3 strands at the top.
Okay, and the chain link, it is a chain link fence, but it has that black.
It's an
So-
upgraded black vinyl coating. Yep. So it's not a silhouette. It's actually the chain link is coated in vinyl to 1 for integrity and 2 for aesthetics.
Okay.
And that also will protect it from eroding with the salt that's used in the area.
And that's on the other side.
It's on the inside of the trees. Yes, sir. Yep.
Was there required an environmental study when companies want to put something in here? And do we have any rights to say what they should be doing?
Great question. So there are different types of environmental studies done, and the ones that you most typically see would be like an environmental assessment worksheet. But this type of project goes through different types of environmental permitting. So while it's not run through that typical process that many of you have seen before through the Minnesota EQB, it's not going to show up in the monitor. So I know that there has been, I've seen some stuff cross my desk with some environmental documentation. It's not necessarily for this, but for the whole pipeline, I saw something come through. But it's not a, it's not as simple or as easy or as friendly of a process, I guess, as the Minnesota typical environmental review that we have with new subdivisions and things like that.
Is there one question? Bill?
Yeah. go
Is
ahead.
there- Are you guys planning on putting any kind of signage, like whether it's 4-foot by 8-foot signs?
There'll be a sign on the station identifying the address of the station. It'll identify the station information for emergency relay information, should there be an emergency at the station. It's about 2 foot by 2 foot. It's actually affixed to the fence, has Northern's contact information for emergencies. It also displays the public information in case there is an emergency, how to identify the station that's creating the emergency so we can respond adequately.
A gentleman mentioned that there's no pollution under normal operations. Could there ever be pollution under normal operations? And could you give us an example
Yeah.
without speculating? Because I know you don't like to speculate.
Correct. Yep. So, yeah.
I'm just joking.
There could be during cleaning operations, but those are disposed of by environmental hazardous companies and they are properly disposed of. We again are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which has a lot more stringent regulations than some of your local state would have over that. So we have strict compliance procedures we have to use for disposal of those particular items. What they could be, I don't know. It could be like grease or something like that, but there could be potential hazardous waste, but it is disposed of appropriately.
And you have a maintenance schedule where you guys show up every 3 months or 4 months or whatever, where you take a look at the entire property and ensure that it's
Twice a month.
twice a
At
month.
minimum, yeah. There'll be somebody that comes out just to make sure things are going. It's also monitored remotely, so there is some alarms that would go off internally at our undisclosed location that monitors the facility. So if there was ever an emergency there, they would have that information as well.
Okay. Stephen said, Cindy, that there's one today on Huntington Way, you know,
There is one, yeah.
and one on 210th Street. There's a building there.
It's not
Have
a
we ever
building
had
on
any-
210th.
I'm sorry.
No building on 210th, it's just valves.
Just valves.
Yep, but there is a sizable station on 210th,
Okay.
just as you cross Dakota, Scott County line there.
Okay. Cindy, we've only been in existence for 9 months. Have there been any complaints about these other facilities in our city?
No, I have not heard of any complaints regarding any of them here.
Like
And
noise or smell or pollution or anything?
No,
like that?
I've not fielded any complaints. I haven't heard of any from
Right.
anybody else here has gotten either.
Yeah, Amy,
Am I correct in thinking that Scott County would have been the body that would have reviewed the
Previously,
request
yes.
for permits?
Yep.
Okay. So thinking about it, I can recall that the station on 210th was built probably sometime around 2017, 2018. At that
2015.
point, we hadn't taken over
Right,
responsibility for planning and zoning, if I recall correctly.
correct.
So I guess I'm not absolutely certain where the other station is. I'm familiar with the one on 210.
You wouldn't be able to see the one on Huntington Way. Actually, it's covered by very large vegetation. Only recently that we replaced the fence is it now a little bit visible. We put in new fencing there, but it's really hidden.
and do you
It's small.
envision this to be the same way once all the trees are in?
So we're doing full grown evergreens with the residual offset, so you're not visually seeing through. So it's a staggered effect to try to hide the station.
Yeah.
I'm also a community member in this area, so I understand it's not a beautiful thing to look at, but most of us have natural gas coming into our homes for heating and cooking purposes. So it is essential service. We do need it. I know that I work here and you may think I'm just saying that, but it's important to our area. It has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to do the best we can to ensure that the aesthetics of it does not disappoint.
And did you do studies and said that that's the optimal area to do it?
So we looked at a lot of things in regards to the installation of this location. And this location was chosen specifically down where it is because we were not able to obtain a voluntary easement up in that center portion where we would like to have been closer to the pipes. We have to be relatively close to our main lines. Most of these lines were installed before any of us were here back in the 30s. So those locations, same with the houses, everything is built around us. So we have really a lot of unavailable areas to build in. So unfortunately, in situations like this where you have growing communities, we have to build within them in order to increase the needs for the service providers. So we find ourselves in these situations and sometimes where communities have built onto our pipelines where we wouldn't have liked that, but there's really no way to create a clear buffer for that.
How many feet below finished grade is your pipe?
Yeah, so it's installed at a minimum of 4 feet deep.
Cindy, on the mapping, would property owners, when they bought their home, could they have ever known that this was going to be put on in that spot, like with the easement and all that, or wouldn't they have known that?
No, they would not necessarily be able to know that without searching land records, information that's recorded at Scott County for all individual parcels that they could possibly be interested in.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't be an easy thing to know.
but could a resident before they bought a property know that there's going to be a substation possibly someday put on this property over here? So they would be able to like at least think, well, maybe I don't want to buy right next to it.
No, I don't think they could really know that because
They wouldn't know
any
that.
company that's making those plans, there's not something recorded somewhere that somebody could find and.
Okay, so this landowner that's giving the easement to this company, they're the ones that just decided to do this, right?
Are you asking who was the decider on granting us the easement?
Yes.
It would have been the landowner.
And before the landowner agreed to do that, nobody would have ever known that a substation was going to possibly be able to be put there. Like the thing I think of is like I have in my subdivision, it says road may be extended some future date. So I knew that someday that road may be extended so I could make a decision, but we wouldn't be able to know.
No, but not any different than you wouldn't be able to know what might go on the vacant piece of agricultural land next to you.
True.
So this doesn't, Cindy, this doesn't change this, that this is residential, or what's the current zone?
This is rural residential and because these types of substations are part of the essential facilities, they are permitted just under a conditional use permit in any zoning district.
The driveway, gravel, what's the finish of going into the property?
Well, that'll be partially up to the city council if they grant the second driveway, but I don't remember what the plans showed.
It would be like a crushed gravel, class 5-ish, something like that, with the culvert if required. We don't know the conditions in which they're going to impose on that yet.
By the way, I forget if I asked this or not. There, I know nothing's guaranteed in life, but the danger to citizens that live around that.
Yeah, so Northern Natural Gas operates a very safe system. We run inline inspection tools every 7 years as required. We're constantly monitoring and we do a yearly walk on all of our pipelines. So it's a very safe product.
City impervious, does it make any difference for what they're doing? Any kind of hard surface cover area that run off where you look?
No,
How
Anyone
long-
else? Go ahead.
Pardon me, how long would the project take to construct, just for
Yeah,
basic understanding?
About 4 months from start to finish to have everything in. It could be also delayed due to weather. So just as a rough estimate.
So if the city council approves this at their next meeting, assuming we recommend it, when would the construction start then?
Immediately.
Immediately?
Yes, sir.
And if the variance for the second driveway isn't allowed, then there's no way to build on that as you don't have access.
Not necessarily. There's a process we would take to obtain access to it. Not appropriate to discuss here, but we are federally regulated. So I'll just leave it at that.
They've strong arm. Any other questions?
Refresh my memory, what is the distance between that valve and where it connects to the pipeline?
Which valve are you referring to? I'm sorry.
Sorry, as we look at the diagram here, the buildings would be on this property right here. Up here, if I'm understanding right, there would be a valve. How far away is the pipeline from that?
it's about 900 feet, just estimating on GIS.
Okay. Point to where the valve is.
Well, just, yeah, from this 200 by 200 parcel or leased area or easement area up to the pipeline.
Is that fairly standard, or is that a result of conditions on the
So-
property or in the area?
We would like the station to be right on top of our pipes, to be honest with you, because that's the best resolution for us. We are actually building this branch line to service the station because we weren't able to put it in the wetland area. So this is not ideal because we have a branch line. We would like to be right on top of the pipe because of environmental concerns for the wetland area. We had to move it, and because we weren't able to go directly next to it, we had to move it even further south to a landowner who was willing to grant the easement to us.
So from this branch, from your station that you proposed,
Mhm.
pipe goes south, comes out of there? Is that what this whole station is about, is to take the natural gas and increase usage south, west, east? What is the purpose of this?
Yeah, it would be for the customer to deliver additional gas to the community. Where their lines are going, I couldn't tell you. I don't have any insight on their distribution.
Okay,
Just one more question, follow
Yes.
up off that, Steve. So the customer then taps into it from the station?
Yeah, there's a transfer of custody in the gas at the location, yes, sir.
And right now, there's no customer pipes in that area, so that would be more construction coming off of that subsite.
I'm not sure what distribution they have. I don't have access to their distribution infrastructure.
Cindy, you say there is a current utility easement running along 27, typically the utility easement also along every public road. Is there one?
I'm not aware if there is one, if there's a separate utility easement along 27 or not. I can tell you CenterPoint Energy is doing a lot of work right now in Credit River.
Yep.
Not necessarily in this area. We're coordinating with them in some other locations in the community. And a lot of that is done through permits to work within the cities right away.
by the way, Cindy, did you talk to Stephen about the site triangle? Needs to be unobstructed.
Yeah.
So
It's in the staff report. You knew that.
that doesn't cause any concern for you?
We might have to just adjust the landscaping a little in that southwest corner so that the viewing,
Right.
you know, of anybody turning
Yes.
in that area is unobstructed.
Where's the extra need? Is it new construction that's causing the need?
I don't know what Center Point, I'm assuming it's Center Point would be the next customer. I don't know specifically what their plans are and how they route it around. Ultimately, the way this is sort of overall working is that you see we have a map or a layer in the county GIS system that shows where natural gas pipelines are, and that's showing up in red. So that's the one we're talking about. There's another pipeline that's coming up through this area. But it could be need in Credit River, it could be need in other locations, and I don't know, I'm not privy to what Center Point's plans are.
Okay. I think we'll take a vote. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm tending to willing to approve this application, given the with the stipulations in the staff report, the recommendations to based on that. Can I get a motion to approve this conditional use permit for Northern Natural Gas?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for Northern National Gas with the stipulations of the 4 recommendations in the staff report.
And actually, I'm going to rephrase what we're recommending to have the city council approve the conditional use permit.
So
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Wolf. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. The conditional use permit is approved.
on the city council.
Is approved to go to the city council for their.
Recommended for.
Recommended for approval. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I always get that wrong. Thank you, Stephen.
So this will be on the city council first meeting in August, which I think is August 1st.
With that said, if they're at the city council meeting, will there also be a public input at that time?
Not typically. Or the public hearing is held at the planning commission level. It would be up to the city council if they'd like to obtain additional input.
And they could do that with a public forum too. Residents can come back at that at that time, and based on what you heard tonight, you can make your voices known again based on what you heard. Okay. The second public hearing we have tonight is the amendment to the zoning ordinance. Everyone should have received the document that's being prepared related to the proposed amendments. There's a number of them. So before I open the public hearing, Cindy, would you kindly?
Yes, I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I'd like to run through what all the proposed
Yes.
changes are
That sounds good.
and the reason for them, basically. So
Right.
we, as you know, we adopted our zoning ordinance about 1.5 years ago, but as you use it, you find things that maybe are, could be worded more clearly. Maybe they aren't quite working the way you thought they should work. Maybe there's an internal inconsistency between one section of an ordinance and another section of the ordinance. So a lot of this is to clean up those types of things. So that we've discovered along the way as we've been applying the ordinance to building permits and such. So the first item is in the section related to accessory buildings and structures. And right now, all properties are permitted to have one accessory building, among other things, but specifically this part, that's not to exceed 120 square feet of floor area. That 120 number matched up with a very old building code from years back, and that has been updated to 200 square feet. So we're just proposing in this case to bring that 200 up to what matches with the building code.
Okay.
And then in addition, in that accessory structure section, we're proposing to change and increase the amount of accessory square footage that would be permitted on a parcel that's between 1/2 and 1 acre from 500 square feet to 1,000 square feet. We think those parcels have that kind of room to take that additional type of structure and are recommending that at this time. It's also consistent with what some of our neighboring communities are doing.
Before we go any further, how is what we're doing here lining up with, say, what Scott County?
Most of it's lining up fairly consistently with what Scott County regulates. Because we did look at that section back, we actually have already amended this section once before. But at that point in time, we left that narrow band where it was, just see how it was kind of working. And since then, we're thinking it maybe needs to be increased a little bit to that 1,000. And then we also are proposing to add in one for properties that are 40 or more acres. Because you notice it just kind of ended at just under 40 acres. So there's kind of a hole there in terms of, well, how do you treat a property that's greater than 40 acres in size? And some people would like to interpret that in a way that if you're over 40 acres, then you could build whatever you want with as much square footage as you possibly want. What I'm proposing is that we start with the 6,000 square feet, but then for that first 40 acres that they have, and then another 1,250 square feet for each additional 10 acres they have located within the same tax parcel. And then with that same 24-foot height that smaller properties would have. Any questions on this accessory section before I keep going through?
Yeah, I've got a few questions here. So I see under item A, second one accessory building not to exceed 200 square feet. My question here is that it's not required to meet setbacks. So does that mean, is there another part of the ordinance that would determine where someone could place such an accessory building?
Yeah, in the zoning districts themselves, it says where you can, for other accessory buildings, not that 200 square foot one, which really is like the Menards shed that you're just.
So somebody could put that right up against the property line?
Right now they could, if you'd like to change that, we could.
I can't support the fact that we wouldn't have a setback for that.
Let's be clear, accessory buildings. You can have movable ones that are not just temporary blocks, like
Mhm.
storage shed, or you have ones that require footings.
Yes.
What are we talking about in this? Any and all?
So in that 200 square foot one, it can't be more than one 200 square foot building. And that one building isn't required to meet setbacks. We don't get a building permit for it. We don't look at any plans for it. You can put that one shed on your property. For any other accessory structure, so that would be of any size or even one additional shed, technically, you would have to go through the whole permitting process. It would have to meet the setbacks, et cetera, et
What
cetera.
are the setbacks in like a rural residential?
I could look it up, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
To me, it seems like we would want to at least put some restriction in there. Because otherwise you could have somebody putting it right up to your property line. And I just am not all that comfortable with the idea that, if it's going to, I think it would be better to have some sort of stipulation around where it goes. I understand that if it's not requiring a permit, then it becomes more of a guideline, but at least it states for the record an expectation about where they should go or should not go.
And we could change that. Obviously they vary depending on the zoning district that you're in, what the setbacks are for a larger, we'll say a accessory garage kind of building.
Yeah.
They're pretty substantial in terms of, you can't get that close to your neighbor's property with a full-blown building.
Mhm.
So I don't know that, I don't know if you'd want to use the same thing. We could simply strike alter that wording just a little bit to say shall be allowed and must meet setbacks.
I'd be comfortable
Um,
with that.
But in that case, I mean, some of them would be quite far from the property line, which,
I think I would see comfort for a lot of residents knowing that someone's not gonna just plop a shed right on the property line when,
And I would probably agree with Wayne. I'm just thinking even in our own edition, Scott, your states.
yep,
You know, see our residential 2.5 acre development, and everybody's thinking they have this buffer. between.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, whether it's a temporary or permanent, even if it's only 200 square feet,
Yep.
all of a sudden it shows up right next to their house, right on the property line. I should say next to the property line, right? And an
Yes.
inconvenient place
yeah,
where they're going, oh, what's our usual setbacks here? You can't come that way, clear trees, and all of a sudden now I see you're building, even if it's temporary.
yeah.
So I would tend to agree with you.
So that was the one thing that raised a question there. I had just a couple of others. When it comes to the modifications related to size allowed, how do secondary well and septic system sites factor in to where, what would be maximum allowed space? Do these sizes typically tend to accommodate and are, if they're allowed,
Yep.
how do we get around the fact that we could have somebody who has, as you bring up later in some of the recommendations, with the contiguous parcel and some of those land shape with the geography features, how do we
Yeah,
factor
great.
that in?
great question. So just because somebody may be able to be permitted to have any of these categories, to be honest, 1,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, whatever it is, depending on their land size. Now, depending on how their property is shaped, where they put the main home, where the driveway is, where the well and the septic are, there are setbacks that are required from the
Mhm.
well and the septic, for example. They may not have room to build that amount of square footage.
Got it.
Um,
I wanted to take that into consideration.
Yeah, it's
if we
definitely
have-
going to be an individual property.
Yeah, that's kind of what I
circumstance.
figured. And then just one clarification here on the 40 acres or more within the same tax parcel, that just simply means that contiguous land that is taxed by the county or comes out of the.
That's in the one
receives the-
tax PID number.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. Thank
So,
you.
correcting, it's 200 square feet. That's not, we not require a permit.
We
I could
don't,
come out and just, I could put up what's 200 square feet, about 13 by 13, something like that. And I can put that up, whether it's permanent foundation or, stuff,
200 square foot building does not require a building permit.
no building permit. So if they, to your point, if they didn't know where their alternative site was, they just plop this building on top of it. Without a permit, they can just bring it back in, blow it there, and it's over.
Right,
Okay,
and that certainly probably does happen.
sure, I'm sure it does.
Any more questions in that part? I did make those changes that we were talking about in the draft to the, to add in that the 200 square foot ones need to are required to meet the accessory structure setbacks.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I'd be more comfortable leaving it at 120 with no setback.
Well, I'm trying to match the 120 up with the 200 in the building code.
200 in the building code is where a permit is required.
Yeah,
So if we left it at 120, we got that 80, that's in no man's land.
right.
All right.
If I could,
Yes.
on smaller lots, then we also have the green pillars.
Mhm.
So they can't put them right on the property, like they have to stay 10 feet away. If they do, a lot of times they don't.
Yeah, again, there's no permit required, so they can go to building and wherever they want.
But
Right,
a
and-
neighbor can petition
Yep.
the city and tell them to move it.
Okay. So neighbor petitions the city and says, well, that this is not their easement, utility, drainage, whatever, that would force that property.
We would send them the letter asking them to move that.
So Cindy, it's true that there's a buffer. You can't just build up to the lot.
Not all properties have that.
Oh, really?
So anything newly platted is going to have those drainage utility easements going around the whole property.
Yep.
And a lot of things that were platted even, in the last 20, 25 years will. But you'll find some sometimes that are just gonna have a utility or a drainage and utility easement adjacent to the road, for example, but not the other lot lines.
Okay.
As you start getting older
Okay.
in terms of plat.
Some of them, the older ones only have 5 feet. 3 feet, or something.
Okay, so I still think we're okay with including the new language.
Okay,
Okay.
with the setbacks?
Yep.
Okay.
All right,
So
let's
then
move on.
moving on to the next section, fencing. So right now, so as you probably recall, when we adopted an ordinance, we modified the Scott County ordinance, so ours really follows theirs. And something that I did not notice until we were enforcing is that our ordinance then also required that an administrative permit's required anytime somebody wants to put in a fence. They have to apply for a permit, I have to review that and approve it. And that's that. So that we're charging a $50 administrative permit fee right now for that review and approval. But to be honest, that review and approval doesn't mean a whole lot because we're not going out there and inspecting it. We're not making sure that whatever we say that they have to follow, they have to follow. So I'm proposing that we eliminate the administrative permit so that we have one less thing we're needing to track that isn't being followed up on for inspections. So that's what the reason for eliminating that first part.
So just to address that. Like Bill's addition, my addition. When you, if the fence is going down and the owner says, no, the property's over there, that's between the property line.
That
That's
is-
between them.
It is
We're not
between.
gonna get in the middle of that, the permit process, making sure it's on their property.
And I wouldn't, even with a permit, I wouldn't get into that. I would just say you have to put it on your property, because that's what the ordinance says. You have to put it on your property. The decorative side, if you will, has to be out facing your neighbors instead of in facing you.
There's
And
HOA regulations. too.
there are, but so it's just, we wouldn't get out there looking at them, making sure they're in the right spot and.
Okay,
So section paragraph 2 kind of follows up with that. It's just taking away a little bit of wording that was related to that whole located entirely on the property of that person. And it had an exception in there for unless the owner of the property adjoining agrees in writing and submits it to the city. I don't want to keep track of any of that.
Yeah.
In terms of whether somebody did or didn't agree.
So what happens if
There's
they,
no permit.
in the past, what happens if there is that in writing and this ordinance was followed? What becomes of it then?
I don't know the.
right, that was the question I was gonna have with all these changes. What happens with grandfather?
Well, any records that we do have on anything we keep, of course, but I'm also not aware of any records that we have regarding that. So.
So it says, I want down the road here, ways all fences except agricultural fences shall be entirely located. So we're talking about, I'm fencing number 2, but
Mhm.
not number 1. So it's, your portion boarding place. They apply, is this any of this apply to them? Are they considered agricultural?
If somebody was doing a riding stable
Like a
or something
commercial?
like that, they would have to come in for a permit. So that would be the kind of exception to the rule, is that as part of those conditional use permits, we would be looking at fencing.
Got it.
In the next paragraph down, the added language is just for clarification. So the first sentence talks about how fences shall not exceed 4 feet in height from finished grade in the front or the corner side yards. And then it went on to say 6 feet in height from finished grade in residential zoning districts and 8 in commercial and industrial districts. And I just changed that to say in rear yards to make that modifier of that. 'Cause I think that's what that was intended to be. I think that's the only changes proposed in the fence section.
One quick question with regard to pools in particular, where fencing is often required. Is the ordinance separate for the pools or is with this particular?
So we look at the fencing with swimming pools when those permits come in.
Yeah.
So it's not a fence permit anyways.
So
They're
it's
getting a
considered
building
separately
permit.
because of the building permit?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. So moving on then, we're also proposing to slightly change the definition of setback. And to just add in that, so right now it's the minimum horizontal distance between a structure, sewage treatment system, or other facility, and just adding in a well in there. We're running into some cases where people are putting their wells within the setback, within the easement, and then that, because you have to have separation of a certain amount between wells and other people's
Yep.
septic
Septics,
systems,
yep.
we're running into some issues with it impacting design on neighboring properties.
Got it.
Or stables.
Or stables. So the first part of that one is just a little bit of clarification language that private riding, horse riding arenas may be allowed in the UER, UERC, and RR zoning districts. Because we said all residential districts before, or the effect was all residential districts before, but we do have on the books some smaller residential districts that certainly, once we actually have properties in those, we wouldn't want to allow riding stables to be in them.
Yep.
And then it just proposes to remove some, again, these are just for private, I own my own house and it's a private, it's just me using it type of riding stable. And it wasn't allowed by conditional use permit either in the table 20-4, if it's allowed. So then the other thing that I proposed, this section before gave a lot of additional square footage of accessory building space to people that had private riding stables that you can't have if you have any other use. So I propose that we delete all of that.
To make it consistent.
To make it consistent and make it, you know, that we don't care what you're using your building for. You can have the amount that you have in the accessory district or, you know, in the accessory standards part of the ordinance, and that's it, not an extra 10,000 square feet if you have a riding stable.
Okay.
Got it.
Anybody who is out there right now would be grandfathered in, of course.
Legacy clause, yeah.
Yes.
Cindy, under number 4, you start out by saying in addition to the submittal requirements in section 2, but we're striking section 2. Right?
Yep.
Good catch.
And I might have to do a little more cleanup there, so I'm just
Yeah,
gonna
just a
highlight
little-
that for now.
Yeah, it
Sorry.
shouldn't take much to clean that.
No.
up.
I'm gonna call it out to myself for later. And then we're also proposing to make some changes to the public stables part. So the table that's in section 20-4 of the ordinance, for a public stable, it calls out that that needs to be an interim use permit. I just wanted to carry that language about it being an interim use permit into this part.
Interim use permits, there's often they review.
They are reviewed, it depends on the terms of what's put in the permit for conditions.
And are they transferable?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It doesn't run with the land. So interim use permits do have termination clauses in them. And then so it would depend on what those clauses say, whether it could be transferred or not. You know, that might be a condition that allows for a transfer, but it also might be something that the use expires, you know, in 10 years, or usually there's some layered levels of termination clauses. And then in that one, I added in paragraph 4, that they need to be, the manure storage area and other waste materials need to be set back 200 feet, not just from adjacent parcels or residences or wells, but also any surface water feature.
Makes sense.
Moving on to animal hospital, just a small,
Just one question.
yeah.
That's a market for stable, and they go like they're a dairy farms. They used to put it. Yeah, they're manure pits, you know, farmers typically, they became more popular, but now they're leaving the popularity of manure pits. Can they use those on a larger commercial horse border? Could they use a manure pit?
You know, they would have to follow all the feedlot rules too, so a lot of that will govern. We just want to make sure that any storage areas that they have for manure in the meantime are not somewhere that surface water could go into them and then drain, or rainwater can go into them readily and then drain into surface water features. Animal hospital, that's just a really small catch. The text said 20, the number said 25, so it's just making, updating that to be correct. Rural residential single family district lot size minimum. So I started with text of proposed here, and then Shane and I got to talking a little more this week, and I can hand out for those in the audience what I'm about to talk about. A little bit of updated text here, or updated proposed text. So a little bit of background for you is that what I know, isn't that lucky of me?
That's why we hired her.
I wish I knew everything that well in advance. So we've been struggling a little bit with some of the lots that are being created in new subdivisions. They are technically meeting the requirements of the ordinance today, but you probably have noticed some comments that we've had in our staff reports that this lot, and this lot aren't super buildable. They're not how people would like to use them and that kind of thing. And certainly you might be able to get that initial home on there, but I get it on the backside later when they want to add the deck sometimes to the house. They can't even put that on. The swimming pool, the accessory buildings, whatever they want to put on there. So where this started out with was Shane and I noticing that we had those types of issues. You know, I think not typical, but a lot of residents in Credit River expect to be able to do more with their property when they're owning 2.5 acres than even a lot of other communities that have a lot of rural residential types of housing. So the attempt of this language, and I have it on the screen too for anybody following along at home, is to try to come up with some reasonable additional conditions to put on those new lots that are being created so that they are more buildable, more usable for what a resident typically wants. So what Shane and I were kind of looking at is that still keeping that part about 2.5 acre minimum with 1 acre of non-hydric soils that's not encumbered by easements or other conditions that render it unusable.
Yeah.
But also adding that the lot must demonstrate sufficient area to accommodate 2 independent sewage treatment systems consisting of at least 5,000 square feet, 50 by 100 each, and be shown on contour that is already embedded within Scott County's ordinance, so that's not a change. But it's just reminding people here that they're gonna have to do that.
Question,
Mhm.
septic sites. Right, with this, that Scott County, you go to them and say that second site is going to work. That they are allowing some places and conditions, scraping off the first site and putting a second site over the original.
I have no idea about that.
Okay, just curious, are we, when it comes to septic sites, and what we're allowing and not allowing, is that still through Scott County or is that through us?
Scott County is
Okay.
still regulating that. And so we coordinate during both plat review as well as building permit review with Scott County on everything
Okay.
for that. So,
All right.
so the goal here was just to bring it a little bit of their stuff into our ordinance to make it easy to find, but then referencing that they need to meet all Scott County ordinances in that regard. So that part really isn't new. It's just adding clarification there.
And if anybody is listening or watching, if anybody is, plain non-hydric. When you state one contiguous acre of non-hydric soil. The meaning of that is.
So I took out contiguous in this version that's in front of you on the paper. But non-hydric soils is soils that are, if it's a hydric soil and contains this higher level of water content, it's not going to be suitable for septic sites at all.
Is that indicative of, say, a spring?
It's
or
wetlands, because I have
wetland?
hydric soil that my house is almost abutting to it. It's like they had to stop building because it's unstable. It's been
Got
too,
it.
historically too wet, over 100 years or whatever.
Got it.
Real wet, clay.
Yeah.
But then we're proposing to add a couple other things to try to address this whole usability, buildability factor in new lots. So we also are proposing to add language that says lot must also meet the following requirements. One, each lot shall contain an eligible building area of at least 20,000 square feet of contiguous land that is not irregular in shape and should be generally rectangular or ovoid with no panhandles, narrow necks, or peninsulas. The eligible building area must have a length to width ratio that does not exceed 4:1. What we're trying to get at with that is to, if you look at a lot of the plats we've been doing, you'll find some lots where there's some buildable area here, and then maybe it narrows down to 3 feet wide for the non-hydric soil area, and then that's wrapping around some other place. And it's kind of disjointed, not really contiguous. It might actually be contiguous, but because of the shape in that case, it's not super usable for a lot of things. So you might have your house here and your septic somewhere else, but to actually use this other part of your theoretical, your buildable area might not be practical. And then the second one is that to the maximum extent practical, all upland shall be accessible from a public road or from the eligible building area of the lot for maintenance purposes. Because we're also running into where we have a part of a lot that might be completely separated from the main part of the lot by a wetland or some other drainage feature, for example. And you have to question and wonder how that property owner can practically get back there to even mow the vegetation that might
So
be on
that's
that
the
back. part.
upland part.
That's the upland part, yeah.
Got it.
Had lots that had that same
Mhm.
As part of a plat.
Went through that split a lot.
Right, and a lot of times we have one in Crescent Curve, for example, that it's an interesting one. It's an irregularly shaped parcel. There's a wetland feature that runs through it. And the septic sites were shown on the other side of that wetland feature, which is fine, that's upland, they can fit there, it all works well. But from a practical sense, it's all working well while everything's being built and the builders are all cooperating with each other. But how do you do anything with those later when there's not access to that except through your neighbor's property?
Yeah.
Because there aren't those easements in place to address all of those types of situations. So we'd like to try to make it so that if it's on your lot, that you can be able to get to it.
Is this gonna upset any developers that are currently developing land?
So
Is it
anything
gonna
that's already,
change any-
yeah, anything that's already platted is grandfathered in.
Is there any things that haven't been platted yet, though, that, but we know about? They just haven't, hasn't been official yet? Is this gonna upset any, is this gonna change anyone's plans, do you think?
It may,
What is the phrase, the maximum extent practical? I mean, that's pretty vague, right?
right, there's certainly gonna be some times where there might be some remnant piece of land that just has to be added into somebody's lot, for example, where there's not much of a choice. You know, those properties that we just were kind of looking at, for example, on near that pipeline.
Right.
Sorry, give me a second to get over where that was. So just for example, using these as an example, if somebody was platting that neighborhood today, and you have this water feature here, but you also have this land that's against the county road, since we don't allow you to have lots fronting on a county road, this is probably what has to happen here is lot line going through that wetland feature and some upland sitting on the other side, unfortunately. So sometimes it's not going to be practical to cause that to happen.
So your sense is this may end up saving some heartache down the road where we're running into issues when someone comes in for a building permit or a conditional use permit and finding out that based on the shape of the lot, so sorry, that isn't actually going to be allowed.
Correct. You know, and another thing that will have happen is that based on the shape of the lot and how much frontage they might have on a city street. And a lot of times this is happening when you have that upland piece here and that upland piece here. We have people coming in asking for that second driveway as well. Because they don't have a way to get to their other piece of upland without a driveway.
Okay,
And they want to, of course, put some building on there or something. So we're hoping that the developers will use that design criteria to help inform their platting of where the lots should be and what shape they are.
thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to now open up the public hearing related to these proposed zoning amendments that we just Cindy just reviewed with us. This is a time for residents to provide comments pertaining to the proposed amendments. We did not receive any written comments
No.
from anybody. Okay. Is there any resident here tonight that wants to make any comments related to these amendments? Hearing none, I'd like to get a motion to close tonight's public hearing. Do I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Motion by Amy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Abe. All in favor of closing tonight's hearing, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion to close the hearing is carried. Any other questions from the commissioners?
I just have a few things. I don't think did we get through all of the changes?
No, we didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we went, I apologize. Oh, geez.
I missed a memo somewhere.
We have two more changes.
Oh, I'm sorry, because we went to this and I thought we were.
Yeah, I
I
just
might
went to that because
apologize
I was,
My
yeah.
apologies.
Bill wants to watch it.
No,
Yeah.
no.
That's it.
Hopefully I didn't close the public hearing prematurely. I don't think I have to open it up again because we've already had this, so we'll just.
If they have any comments after they hear
Yeah.
this other part, we can.
Okay, let's finish.
Yeah, so they're really simple in both the commercial and the industrial districts. We propose to add language saying that lots that are created need to have a minimum of 200 feet of frontage on a 10-ton road and prove to current city standards. That sort of mimics language that we already have in the residential ones.
Yeah.
Except for the 10-ton feature that we don't have in the residential.
In residential, is that 5 ton then?
There's just no tonnage listed. so-
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep. I think with that, that covers all of everything.
That was it?
Yeah.
There's
So-
one more in the industrial too.
It's the same thing.
It's the same language.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the changes you're gonna make now, do we need to table this so you can come back with the, or can we,
No, you
based on our
can
discussion, we can approve
You
based
can-
on the change?
recommend approval based on the discussion, and I've already taken the notes in here, so.
Great.
But it's your call, how you'd like to do it. if you'd
I have
like
one
to.
more question if I
Yes.
could. That 4-to-1 ratio,
Mhm.
how did we come up with that? I mean, what's the rationale behind 4-to-1?
We're just trying to make it have a shape that has some amount that will end up being usable with that 20,000 square feet. So we're trying to make it not so prescribed that you have to have a square, say,
All right,
but we don't want to end up having it be so narrow that it's practically not usable. So that's really the rationale. It's a number that's pretty commonly used in other locations that have
okay,
this type of restriction. What we're proposing here is used in a lot, some variation of it's used in a lot of places.
okay.
A lot of them have actually another 10 characteristics, and we tried to narrow it down to just what we really thought we,
So if I had a plat and it was 2.5 acres, but I was 3.5 to 1, I've got to add on some extra land
well,
on
this,
there. in
yeah,
order to
this
make
is
that
for
work.
just that area that's that buildable area.
Right, so I've got to make more buildable area to hit that.
Right,
ratio.
and that's just to make sure that somebody doesn't have, because we've seen some lots come through here where they might be, I can think of a couple in one plat we approved last year that, again, met the ordinance requirements, but it was, had a lot of road frontage and not much depth at all. So once you apply that 67-foot front yard setback, and in that case, they also had a setback from the stream for shoreline rules. There was basically something deep enough that you could build the house on, but you couldn't put a deck on it necessarily, depending on the shape of your house. It would all depend on how you did that. If you wanted to do an accessory pool, it would have to be in your side, to the side of your house. It couldn't be in the rear, and it just was so, the buildable area is so long and narrow.
And so this really changes it so that someone buys the lot, thinks they're gonna put this on, comes in here, and now they're not.
We're
getting
trying to give
upset.
them a shot at something more what they're probably expecting than, because if we find out these things after the fact, when they come into their next project usually.
All right,
It's not the initial house that goes up. The builder's finding a way to make that work. But there wasn't necessarily, the homeowner might not have known at all what they're gonna wanna do later. And they assume they have, I can't tell you how many times someone comes in and tells me, but I have 2.5 acres.
all right.
So it's just trying to give them a chance at having a little bit more. Yeah, yes. And because we've made those comments, and tried to do it through just the comment process, but they won't, if it's not an ordinance requirement, they won't change it.
I know it's tough to put perfect criteria around it. I
Mhm.
appreciate that it has been simplified as much as possible. And, could help set resident expectations much more in line with what they are assuming and expecting when they come to us asking for permits or conditional use permits. That's a tough one.
Anything else? Yes, so can I get a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the proposed zoning amendments as discussed tonight with the changes, and I'm not gonna read them all because I can't actually remember all the ones that you're gonna change, but
Yep.
with the changes that we discussed, can I get a motion to approve those?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Motion
second.
by Steve, seconded by Amy. All in favor of recommending the proposed amendments with the changes we discussed indicate by saying aye. Anyone opposed? Aye.
I oppose.
One opposed? Okay, okay,
I
well,
really just oppose on that last one, right? I just feel like if we've got a lot that's 2.5 and people know about it, I just feel like we're putting more restrictions on that.
okay,
Everything else I'm fine with.
okay.
And it's passed already.
Well, if it passed 4-1. I will, I believe the motion is carried by a vote of 4-1, so. Since there's no other business before us, can I get a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Motion by Mark, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Abe, all in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, indicate by saying aye. Anyone opposed? Motion to adjourn meeting is carried. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Would you shut off your microphones?
Did I tell you that?
I wouldn't want to.
That was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
If there was an issue, I can't. It's just like, I built a subdivision next to my.
Right.
And the only comfort is it looks like it's gonna be pretty shielded. And where I read about how the decibel is 55 decibels. I looked at it, but it wasn't anything that's stated, but it's like the sound of the refrigerator or some Thursday or indoors. So it's, I don't know whether I get the gentleman that was on the was not.
No.
Maybe
The only one.
He's gonna see it,
Yeah.
Can see it.
And the residents on the west, if they ever do, I get that. I think it's like,
Oh, that's good. But they can't take everything, they can
No.
only see part of the easement. You know that. You know that. Or they don't.
right.
How do you know that? They're all the stuff you put in our road. The thing is, when it ain't gonna happen.
No.
Probably they're like.
So I said,
If you don't move
you'd have
that
to build
tomorrow,
so much more south, and that's just gonna be.
The only other thing I can think of
We
is.
don't allow stuff on our road, overnight stuff. Wow, let me make some phone calls. So they moved everything over there. Oh, really?
I can remember.
Wow.
There's gravel up until I was.
Wow.
And so.
They do.
That's just the best condition I've
Cindy and
ever
Mike.
been.